Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Geospatially Africa podcast, the podcast for the African geospatial community. My name is Opeyemi and I'm your host for today. Today promises to be very, very interesting because we will be talking about, my guest and I, will be talking about a very important but little known topic in GIS and its applications. And as you know, we like in this podcast to talk about various applications that could really help us here in Africa that we are really not using or maximizing. And that one is GIS in Business, which we'll be talking about today with our very special guest. Now, let me just go straight into who our guest is so that you can understand and get the flow of what we'll be talking about today. Our guest today is in person of Alazar Tekle. He is the person in charge of AddisMap Addis Ababa, and he is also an expert in using GIS for business in Africa here, especially in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And he has given us the honor of interviewing him today to basically let us in on some of his activities and how he has seen businesses partake or maximize the use of using locational intelligence for their business planning and sales planning and logistics. And also, Alazar would even be talking to us about some of his projects that he is currently working on, which I think are really equally awesome. So without further ado, let me just introduce Alazar.
All right. My name is Alazar. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today to do this podcast. And yeah, we were very happy when we received the invitation. Well, I started as an IT, and when we were working on different IT projects, but and we got organized and started discovering or discussing about implementation of OpenStreetMap. It's an open source mapping implementation, and yeah, that's how my journey with geospatial data started, and that's how I got into this mapping and different implementations. Well, AddisMap came as a byproduct, if I am allowed to say. It's a really great application. When after working on it, it turned out to be a great application. But initially, it was sort of a byproduct just to support our open source initiative to implement the OpenStreetMap project here, and hence put Ethiopia on a well-detailed map, and that's how we started AddisMap too. So yeah.
Okay, then I would like you to just talk a bit about, some of your work with how you got into the GIS for business, your work with Coca-Cola Addis Ababa, a bit about the work that you have done in that sector as well.
So yes, when we started OpenStreetMap, we needed to include a lot of people into the project because since it's mapping and it needs a lot of resources, we turned to producing a business side of it, and that's how AddisMap was born. But after releasing the first version of AddisMap as a website that allows people to locate places, we started experimenting with advertisements, which are not a very good business model for any type of online business. But at the time, they were a bit positive in our country, and yeah, we benefited some from that. But as time goes on, the marketing or the demand was declining because a lot of companies are coming online, and a lot of manufacturing companies, they started looking towards other softwares that helps them internally instead of just publishing whatever companies they have online. So what we did was Coca-Cola came out with a request for implementing a marketing survey to expand its operations in Addis Ababa. So back then it was around close to 8-9 years. Most of the things were not that much digitalized and automated as nowadays. And some of the things we use for collecting data and implementation were manual. So we discussed with them on how to implement it, and the funny thing is there were no smartphone applications during that time, so we used Garmin's to guide us to places to follow our map. We categorized Addis Ababa into We categorized Addis Ababa into different subcities using the subcities. We sectioned them into different places and areas so as to enable us and surveyors. And most of the data, like the inputs, were collected on a paper Excel sheet, a printed Excel sheet. So they all what they have to do is like whenever they go to that specific area, they just input the location on the Garmin and come back with paper filled forms. And we have to sit manually and use Excel sheet to properly format it and put on filters and different extra information. Yeah.
Thank God for mobile apps now, like survey apps like Survey 123 and Kobo Connect and all that. Then we don't have to do all that again these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's awesome.
Definitely, definitely. That was actually very hassle, very, very complex and
Wow.
exhausting. A lot of mistakes happened along the way. So yeah, and but nowadays, after implementing for Coca, a lot of companies started following them. And although we didn't do for every company, we were able to get a certain market share from that. And we started, I mean, in order to since Coca-Cola is a giant company, they can afford the cost, even if it was manually done and it required a lot of human resources. They can afford the cost. But when you come to local establishment, local factories, when they start out, they may not be able to afford that kind of project or technical implementation, and they would rather rely on the manual go-to-market strategies just to get started and get their products out and start generating revenue. So what we did next was experimented on open source products and projects. So at least the cost the technology cost would be minimized, the automation cost would be minimized, and we can do this type of project with a low human resource requirement.
But would you still have been able to get the same level of authenticity and accuracy when you use open source rather than people going out to these places and getting the data? Because now it will require less human resources, but then would you be able to get the same
Hmm.
level of quality of data?
Well, I mean, even during the Coca-Cola project, some of the crazy things we were not able to control was some of our surveyors was used to sit in a cafeteria and just input the data manually from where they sit, like whichever shops I think, and that kind of works. And also, people until they get very familiar with the technology, inputting data is a bit hustlers. Like you have to have patience. You need to know the right key pairs, like know some of the words in terms of mapping. So that was the issue, especially when automating. We had a lot of typo errors that needed to be fixed, and especially in terms of categorization, we use generic categories that are agreed in the OpenStreetMap category because they are easier to implement in terms of technology and also for other users to implement them in their own way. So most of the data that are input using Kobo and things like that, we needed to experiment a lot to come to a better understanding and usage. But initially, there were a lot of errors, starting with the typo and explaining what type of establishment that place is or what kind of location it is, and things like that. Yeah, but nowadays we have well, after a lot of experimentation and experience, we've come to minimize those type of errors.
So hopefully, if companies these days want to implement stuff like that, also they can then use the current data that is the current technologies that are
Exactly.
available, and then even it reduces cost these days. Like the cost will be reduced since all these technologies have come out, and then the data also will be of better quality and to be less stressful. So yeah, that's why most companies should even look to those, because I'd really like to know now what were the benefits, what were the reasons
Hmm.
behind that? Because okay, now we've gone through the challenges that you faced, but then why do you think companies would need this type of data? Why would you think that because like I said, I think when we were talking initially, you mentioned that these companies are using
Mm-hmm.
these things around, but people
Mm-hmm.
think that they are so foreign to them. The
Mm-hmm.
technology is so foreign to them, but that's how these companies have been getting stuff done, and on a global level, at the global standard. So would you just try to explain to us a bit about some of the benefits? Like, why would any company want to go through all this? What do you think they can get from it? Yeah.
Okay. Actually, there are quite a lot of benefits to this. The major ones are time and resources, especially financing. Because first, when you start a company, or especially for manufacturers and distributors, whether they're manufacturing or they're getting it from another factory, when it comes to distribution, the marketing part is very complex when using manual methods, because nowadays there are a lot of competitions, a lot of similar products fighting for the same market. And also, you need to know when to approach your customers. You need to be able to manage your inventories. You need to join all these resources, the product, the location that requires attention, and the location that have a lot of competitors. You need to identify that to best maximize your market reach. And that's one of the major benefits. But the other thing is, when you program your routes, sometimes, especially in our case, when we go to companies to implement this type of technologies, most of the resistance comes from the drivers, or from the delivery trucks, because they have their own certain customers, or they have certain business dealings on the side, and they intend to focus on those routes, and it can be from one end of the city to the other end, and it's in, they interrupt what they don't really get organized in terms of routes and areas they serve. So that's one of the major benefits.
Yeah, that's where management comes in.
Exactly.
Yes, because when they can implement these automated, routes, and then they can monitor it from the back end at the office, then these drivers cannot do, this all these their side dealings and all. And when it's geocoded, and yeah, the geocode where the driver is supposed to be, where they are supposed to deliver. When they are not there, they've gone somewhere else. So that's like the power of locational intelligence. Yes.
Exactly. The other thing is, one case story is a food manufacturing factory here. They do the distributions, but they built their market properly using manual methodologies, like in traditional way. But they wanted to come to implement this technology, and they want to make sure they have the chance to see areas where they need to expand, the capacity to see different competitors, what's coming up in the market. And when we gave out I mean, since they were doing 100% sales, they weren't especially the marketing side was reluctant to implement it. But once they started implementing, it came very helpful for the management, especially in terms of cutting costs, because most of the drivers or the distribution vans that are sent out there, they finish their distributing the product within half a day, but they spend half of the day doing something else, and that incurs fuel and other costs for the
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
So that way, they were able to minimize and arrange the timing of the drivers and things like that, synchronize when each driver should go and how long they should stay on the field. That's also one of the benefits we saw.
Yeah, even here, because as you have taken that, especially with Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has been the one implementing basically locational intelligence for business
Hmm.
in Africa, because I know experience from Nigeria
Yes.
here, the Coca-Cola NBC Nigeria, then also Voltic Ghana,
Hmm.
where we have our
Hmm.
Sihana here, then also you in Addis Ababa, and I'm sure in other parts of Africa also. When they are implementing their sales structure or strategy, they make it a key
Hmm.
focus, and it helps them basically optimize sales and cut costs. So I know, you said
Exactly.
it's a big company and they could afford all this, but I know with time, as we adopt, as more
Hmm.
companies look for and adopt these practices, with more practice and more innovation, the costs can be reduced even to the level where small and medium scale enterprises can also even implement it on a smaller scale. But it's just for people to know,
Exactly.
really, for people to know that this technology is out there and it can really help your business, instead of you thinking GIS is so
Exactly.
foreign to you. But it's really important and you can even adopt it, and that's really the point of this
Exactly.
episode. And yes, thank you so much, Aliza, for letting us in on that, on that experience. So now let's go on into AddisMap and your baby. Let's talk about the projects that you're
Yeah.
currently working
Yes.
on, because I know you're a broad spectrum expert in the use of OpenStreetMap data. So, and we'd really like to know much more about that. So please let us in on, some of the things that you're doing with AddisMap. First of all, how it came about. You mentioned that it was a byproduct, but then it became so successful, and we would really like to hear about the success story, really.
Great. Well, I mean, as I said earlier, AddisMap was initially a mechanism to support our open source projects, and we started out using advertisements to generate revenue. But after a while, when the market wasn't that interested in that sort of digital solution, we started experimenting with various types. One of the things we said is the route to market or the GIS implementation for businesses and distributions. But the other thing is we needed to find a way for people to have their own business website, like come up with their own website, have a location there, edit, and place whatever type of content or material they need. Sort of a directory, but with more control and special geospatial data supported. And also they will have places nearby and different ratings and things like that. But now, I mean, that's how it increased. But in time, we also added booking systems into it, especially since we had about 1,000 hotels, starting from the lowest, from the bed and breakfast, to the 5 stars existing around the country. We added booking, we integrated booking services, and also the other things we did was event-based promotions, like selecting locations, promoting their events if they have different events, bookings, and things like that. And we also added flight booking services, which were not that successful, but in general, AddisMap opened a way for various implementations, and especially we kind of used it as a way to brainstorm the community in terms of the fundamentals of mapping and how useful it can be especially in the current days for businesses and even for personal gains. And yeah, that's how AddisMap came to be.
So, from what I understand from Addis map, it was basically a more detailed and more locally sourced map, sort of like Google Maps, but for Addis Ababa.
Yes,
And you incorporated even more functionalities like booking, hotel booking, ride hailing, and all that into Addis map, and all based on open source OpenStreetMap data. Really?
exactly. Yes, because we used OpenStreetMap for backend services. It's really easy. People don't know it and rely on Google, but it's really easy and simple to implement and very powerful.
And we'll know that OpenStreetMap, yeah, very powerful and very detailed,
Yes,
and it's easy to update. And
yes,
if not for certain issues around the quality of the data, I'd even rather say like OpenStreetMaps, because there are so many
hmm,
volunteers updating on different, every time it's always being updated. It's even a bit more detailed if we can use it,
yes,
for all these
yes,
types of implementations. And
yes.
you were able to implement Addis map in such a way that, because from one of the presentations that you did where I came across, you were able to use it for transportation, to improve transportation
Hmm.
in Addis Ababa. Could you please let us know a bit about that?
Okay, that's also one of the surprising outputs we found by using OpenStreetMap and AddisMap. Uh, we came up with an application called YeneGuzo, but it's not originally 100% created by AddisMap, but it's also another open source implementation that allowed us to power up our OpenStreetMap data and really make it usable for the community. YeneGuzo basically is a trip planner application that is an implementation of Trufi, a global open source trip planner application. And it was created out of the need for transport maps in Addis Ababa because the city was growing. A lot of people, the transport demand was growing, and it was becoming very complex, especially for the government to provide information on the routes and the times of the major public transports like the buses and the minibuses that are operating. So we started experimenting with this. We took a sample from the London bus map and transport for Cairo with the printable versions, and we started those types of printable maps and posting. We agreed with the Addis Ababa Transport Bureau, and we started posting them on the bus stations. After that, we were approached by the WRY. It's a resource center that has a country office in Ethiopia, and they were doing at the same time they were doing data collection for these bus maps, and they were looking for various technology companies or private startups or companies that would be able to digitalize and use that data for easier access of the community. And also the ministry was interested in getting that project out. That's where we came in. So we took that data, edited it, and uploaded it to OpenStreetMap for easy access and making it open for the public. And that's one of the challenges we had to go through, especially in terms of developing the transport maps, because our government was very reluctant and very suspicious of using open source data. And they wanted it to be more private, but since it incurs a lot of costs and it becomes a very expensive project, we forced them to see the good side of the benefit of using
That's the idea.
Product and data. And yeah, that's how it came about to be. That's how YeneGuzo was born. And now we're also re-engaging that community and trying to see how we can best reach out more people, because since it's data, it has to be updated and manned, and we need to expand it towards the community and involve as much use group as possible so that they can update the data, even update the source code for the application.
Hopefully, when more people have seen how successful it can be and its uses, then they'll get on board and try to update it as well.
Exactly. Yes.
I also understand that you're doing something similar with the Juba government of South Sudan. Does that mean that you can implement something similar to AddisMap for all major governments and local areas based on this open source data alone?
No, not actually, not a major government.
Okay.
Well, that came along with the state of the map presentation. Yeah, since it was for Africa, we were approached by different groups and teams that were very looking forward to implementing something similar to AddisMap, especially get open source data to people in a custom way, because using OpenStreetMap directly is not that very suitable for the common user unless you're a mapping enthusiast or you want to implement your own type of system based on that. OpenStreetMap is not for daily usability. So that's how AddisMap came about to be. And the same request came from a team in Juba. They wanted to develop a prototype for Juba city because since most African countries, they need to see something done especially in terms of governments to give you support or to provide you with any type of policy or any type of support. They need to see a demonstration or something developed and going on, because when you approach them with an idea, they're very reluctant and they're scared of the costs it might incur. And and especially since they don't have an open working relation with private companies, it's not going to look good on them. So that's why we wanted to come up with OpenPlaceGuide, with that because of the requests that came from Juba and from State of the Maps meeting. There were another request to do the same thing, and yeah, that's how OpenPlaceGuide came up to existence. That way, we can allow people that approached us. There was a team that wanted to implement, to come up with the same thing as AddisMap, and they approached their government. But since most African countries don't have a policy in terms of governments that supports private companies, they approached us to find a way to implement it with low cost and in a very simple and short period of time. That's how the Juba concept came about to be. With that, I think there was another request from, if I'm not mistaken, from Tanzania or Madagascar, the same request to work together on implementing the similar type of AddisMap for their country. So we sat down with our CTO, the main developer for the technology. So we sat down and brainstormed. Yeah, that's how we went into the coming up with an open source implementation that can work for all of Africa.
Okay, and I think that's OpenPlaceGuide. That's the new variation of AddisMap for Africa this time around, right?
Exactly. When we discussed about Juba map, we sat down and saw what needed to be done. But we don't have the financial capacity, and also we didn't want to force them to pay for the development or for the implementation. Rather, we wanted to make it a collaborative project. That way it can grow and become so useful or important. And also, by making it open, we can push our governments, not just Ethiopian, not just Sudan, or most African governments, of government institutions, to rely on open source products and companies or teams that have such implementation, rather than going to commercial products or reaching out for international partners. So that's why OpenPlaceGuide was concepted or initiated.
Yeah, so I think the lesson to learn here is I think it's for more people to know about the power of using this type of locational data. And I think when more people see the use case for it, when they are in demand or there's a need for it,
Exactly.
and then more people would want to focus on developing what you already have on ground. And I like the fact that it's open source, it's out there for everybody to see and to edit and to update. And even mega geospatial softwares like QGIS today started like this also. You know, it started like this for everybody to come and work together and optimize and improve it. And it's still open source. And I think that's what we need here in Africa, where there's never enough money to do all these things, but then there's open source. Thank God for open source, you know. And now that it's open and out there, yes, more people know about it. There's more demand for it. More people want to improve it for us to use. And I think that's the beauty of OpenStreetMap and open data. Yes, and that's why it's really important for us here in Africa that we really understand and appreciate the importance of free and open source software for geospatial technologies and all. Yes, so I think it's really commendable what you are doing with, you know, the fact that you don't just stop at just one place. When you see that it needs to be improved, you go a step further to improve it. And now you have brought AddisMap to OpenStreetGuide for all to be able to use and improve. And yes, that's really, really commendable, Alazar.
Thank you. One thing I would like to add here is there's also another thing we're currently experimenting on the same project, especially on this OpenPlaceGuide, that is to allow different IT groups or teams, whoever wants to implement this technology in their home country or their city, they can add a small layer on top of that and come out with a different business product on top of it. They don't really necessarily have to just go contribute towards the open source code they can just directly implement that open source technology, but on top of it, place whatever they can add any type of technology or layer they want to in order to create some sort of business use case. So it's also open for that. We just don't demand for people to just contribute so that they can use it, or they just have to go to OpenPlaceGuide and there is just one website that serves everything. People are allowed to implement it for their own specific use case, and they are allowed to turn on or off some features that are available on the core source code of OpenPlaceGuide.
Okay. Oh, that's good. And I think from what I understand is that apart from, it being scalable to a large scale to a country, individuals and even small groups can also go there and customize it to their own particular use. Yes. And that's really amazing. What phase of completion is the open page guide now? And when can we all start to enjoy like its all these benefits and features that it has?
Okay. Currently, we have done the demo just for the initial part, like enabling the data editing, adding layers and stuff like that. But the current phase would be to add locals or language translations, at least add 2 or 3 major language translations, and also just customize the user interface and the backend code. Just because we understand the coding or how it works or how it can be implemented, we're not going to expect people to with the same level of understanding about that code base, because every code base differs, and especially when it comes to open source, people need to have enough documentation, enough very quality and very easy to understand code bases to implement it easily. So we're working on that part and the language, and hopefully 2 or 3 months it will be open, at least for testing and see how it goes and collecting user feedback.
That would be awesome. That would be really good. I know you'll get it across to us for us to give to our, listeners and followers as soon as it drops.
Definitely.
And we're really looking forward to that. Yes, we're really looking forward to that. That's really commendable, Aliza. And all we've said along the line, I'll just like to chip in just this very basic, because I always like to summarize what we've said about OpenStreetGuide.
Okay.
And from what I understand, OpenStreetGuide is basically targeted at anyone with an interest in spatial data visualization and analysis. It's a platform where geospatial data can be stored, copy and paste from another source, edited and visualized, and shared with minimal technical or developmental requirements. The framework can be easily modified to suit specific visualization and analytical uses. Am I right, Alazar?
Definitely. One of the things, while everybody is implementing this, one of the things we need to remember is everything is done adhering to the principles of open source. Like there are different one for OpenStreetMap, they have different data sharing. In terms of data sharing and updating, they have their own strict guides. So since we rely on them, one of the things we will strict people or users to adhere to is that, and the other is for this common creatives guidelines. So that way we can at least have something that everybody can rely on. So there are things; those things are also to be noticed, or people should be cautious about that too. They need to understand that when we say open, there are things we need to adhere to also.
Okay, that's beautiful. Okay, so when anybody wants to develop or update anything on the OpenStreetGuide, they must adhere to Creative Commons and the open source ideology, basically.
Exactly. Yes.
I know eventually, when this thing lands and it's launched and people start to bring contributions, I think that will be majorly what you would need from just any user, because I know it takes a little level of technical capability, such as proper programming and proper knowledge of the open source ideology, to be able to contribute to the
Exactly.
code. And I think it's something
Yes.
that even softwares like QGIS does. Like, okay, there are lots of contributors, but these contributors are vetted, and we know that they are
Yes,
all capable of adhering to these things. So eventually it
exactly.
won't just be about just anybody can come and edit code.
Eh,
All you can do
Yes,
is contribute. You could just suggest what could be done to improve it, and eventually
exactly,
a group of developers can work on these changes from time to time. I think
exactly,
that's what will be
exactly.
expected. I
Yes,
really look forward
that's
to this being like one of the major contributions of Africa by Africans to the open source software
definitely, yes,
of the world, globally. Because I know softwares like QGIS and other free and open source software for geospatial, they were started outside Africa. But even us here in Africa, we maximize it. We use it a lot in all of our geospatial, work. So it would be good for Africans also to contribute this to the world. You understand? If you know what I'm saying.
definitely.
Yes.
Yes, that's one of the things we really look forward to because we see a growing community of mapping enthusiasts, people contributing for different causes, especially when you come to the OpenStreetMap community. It's very motivating and very inspiring, especially the African community. I am part of. I strictly follow the WhatsApp group. I strictly follow what is posted in the movement in Africa, and I see it's really important for us to be able to push this out too, because we see a nice or very motivating and inspiring community that is working towards this.
Yeah. Yes, and hopefully when more people are more enthusiastic, at least by our aim and our goal is to get more people buzzing about GIS and what geospatial is about here in
Yes,
Africa. And when more people know about these things, when our aim and our goals are starting to be achieved, and a lot of people know more about it and the uses of it, then hopefully more people will be interested in contributing, and we'll be able to achieve the greater goal. Yeah, definitely.
yes,
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that was really awesome, Aliza. And one last question now before we just round things up.
okay.
One last question that I really like to ask, our guests is, where do you see the African geospatial space in the near future, say in the next 5 years? Where do you hope to see the African geospatial space?
Well, I mean, yeah, just as you said it, not just in terms of from our perspective, not just because we're planning on releasing this open place guide and making it usable in all over Africa, but I've seen a lot of technologies coming up in Africa, different implementations for humanitarian, for very collaborative products in terms of transportation, governance, and different ideas that are based on geospatial data. And honestly, in the next 5 years, I'm very optimistic that there will be different applications coming out that will make a great impact in terms of making decisions in terms whether it's government or businesses that will affect the economy of Africa towards affecting the economy, because currently there are different implementations here and there, but right now there are different collaborations growing up, teams growing up, and also we're seeing different international tech companies increasing their interest in coming towards Africa. So by getting ready with these technologies and with these implementations, we will be in a good position to create some unicorns or very impactful companies. But in terms of community impact, I really look forward to seeing the impact it creates on governments towards making decisions, towards administration and governance, because it has a wide variety of implementations, and within the next 5 years, that will definitely grow. That is what we're hoping to see, and that's what we believe we will see.
Hopefully, that's the prayer.
Yes,
Really, the governments
yes,
uptake it. Governments see the benefits and implement these things to help us here in Africa, and even individuals see the benefits and use it for themselves, for their businesses, and for the greater good, really. And thank you so much for that, Aliza. Yes, definitely.
Thank you very much.
And with that, as we come to the end of of this episode, it was really awesome recording with you, Aliza.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope you've had as amazing a time as I have bringing this to you. If you did, remember to subscribe on any platform you get your podcast from so you get notified every time a new episode drops. Also, we'd love to hear from you. So if you have any comments, requests, or suggestions, shoot us an email at gspatially@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter at geospatially. We are also on LinkedIn as Geospatially Africa Podcast. So we look forward to hearing from you. Bye.